So if you decide to pick your nose, the only one who knows is the three of us.
Perfect. Unless I vocalize it right.
That's true. If you
You're
say
welcome
you're
to.
doing it,
Yeah.
then I can't help you. Welcome to Winning Hand, the podcast about Marvel Champions, one card at a time. I am your host, Boom Guy, and I'm here today with Lazy Titan.
How's it going?
And special guest, Nelson.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Nelson, welcome to the podcast. We are so happy to have you here. For anyone listening, this is Nelson from the giant Nelson All Over brand. He's dropped into the pod to say hello. So we're excited to have you here. If this is your first time here, welcome to the podcast. We are a podcast about Marvel Champions, the card game. If you've listened before, welcome back. We're glad to have you. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, if you like what you hear, please do leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you choose. It helps us get the word and get the podcast into people's hands. Before we start, Nelson, usually we just jump into the podcast, but since you are a guest, we have some questions we ask our guests.
I'm
So
ready
I will
for them.
start
I
with
studied.
those. You studied. Good. I'm glad. I hope you did your homework because we are going to put you through the ringer here. First thing we ask all of our guests is, how did you get started with the game? When in the game's life cycle did you join, and what's kind of been your journey with the game so far?
So the time that I bought the game and the time that I started playing the game are different because I have probably had Champions on my shelf in shrink wrap for 4 to 6 months before I actually ever broke it out.
Oh, wow.
I came from a background in primarily board games. I really enjoyed Marvel Legendary, which is kind of the deck building game that it gets compared to pretty frequently, and people were recommending Champions, and so I bought it, and then I actually broke it out in probably early 2021. So right when Galaxies was coming out, and then I just consumed all the content, grabbed Galaxies Most Wanted, got demoralized, but not too badly because I came back and I have been playing this game. This is my most played game by far now, and so it's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah, I think the Galaxy's Most Wanted cycle, I remember at the time kind of following on Reddit because I got in shortly after launch. But I remember following along with the community back then, which was a little bit smaller. And I think that cycle caused a few people to kind of fall off and they never came back, which is too bad. I'm glad you stuck it through.
Yeah.
And can you please tell us your favorite aspect and your favorite hero to play?
Yeah, so those are kind of tied together. My favorite aspect is protection. I'm a huge green fan. I like kind of all the ways you can play protection with the always ready, the stun locks, and then my favorite way to actually play protection is the perfect defense type build. And the hero that I always say is my favorite hero, which I probably could, think about this again, and maybe this has changed, but I always say Quicksilver. That's the one I always go back to because he's the one who actually taught me how to play protection because he gets that free ready every phase. And so I was able to defend, stand up, which as I was approaching the game, I was trying to learn how to utilize defense and make sure that I still got all the threat taken care of and damage taken care of. And Quicksilver kind of helps with that. And so I have a special place in my heart for Quicksilver because he taught me how to love protection.
You are clearly a man of high taste.
It's true.
Protection is the best. And
It
I knew
is.
there was a reason we had you on. So that's great. I'm glad to hear. Quicksilver, I like Quicksilver. I kind of don't play him a lot anymore. But when he first came out, I remember I played him quite a bit. I did like that free ready. I'm a big protection fan. I think protection has grown a lot. Back then, the kind of readying and defending was a pretty standard defense build. And I think there's just a lot more options now. But protection is great. Glad to hear you are on the protection train.
Yeah.
Aggression's superior.
Lazy Titan always likes to go for aggression, but it's fine. We'll let it go.
I can't stand you protection players.
We're the one who are keeping you alive.
Yeah,
but
remember that.
Who's advancing the game state? That's me. Okay,
That's
you don't win
fair.
by defending. Okay,
That's fair.
You win by damage.
Although it's getting better, right? There are ways to do damage in protection now. I think protection is still the most varied. I think it has the most different archetypes and ways to play in it, but I think it's still the strongest, I would say, too. How do you think about it, Nelson? Do you think protection is the strongest aspect, or what's your opinion on that?
I think that all kind of boils down to player count. I think
Mm,
in true solo play, I think Justice is probably the strongest for the majority of the characters out there, and then followed pretty closely by leadership.
mhm,
In a in a multiplayer game, I have a lot less experience in multiplayer, but I still feel like Justice is just so good at what it does. Its threat mitigation is off the charts, and if you have a good built Justice deck at the table, you can have everybody else kind of focus on what they need to do. So I think Justice is probably the strongest,
mm,
but also Protection's gotten a lot better. It's definitely the most
mhm.
improved aspect since the game's
Yes,
conception.
I agree. I'd probably say overall across player counts, I'd probably say leadership is the strongest. The one weakness I think Justice has is that consistently, right? If you're really good at thwarting, you might eventually run out of things to do. And there are decks I've played in multiplayer settings where at some point you're like, okay, I still have cards on my hand, but there's like nothing left to thwart. It's all gone, even with one way or another, which I think was a huge boon to that because it was a
Mhm.
problem before. But leadership, you can just pivot and do damage. You generally can just do everything. And Justice, ultimately, as Lazy Titan alluded to, doesn't advance the game state. It keeps you from losing, but ultimately you have to do damage to win. But so a few episodes ago, we started doing listener questions because I get a lot and they're in this inbox. And so we decided to do one an episode. So this episode, we have a question, and I forgot to write down who this is from. I'm sorry. You know who you are. They asked about player count. They asked about our favorite player count, what we think the best player count for the game is, and what we play the most. I will let you start, Nelson, since you're the guest. What are your thoughts on player count? Best, favorite, most played, wherever you want to start.
Okay, so most played by far is true solo. So one hero at the table, me sitting in the room, and typically on stream
Hmm.
is my most played player count. I think that the game really shines at two, maybe three player. I think
Hmm.
four is a little much. Four is very busy on the table, but two player counts where you can build those decks together and build the synergies in between the two heroes that are sitting at the table. I think that's where the game shines. I mean, Marvel thematically is all about teamwork, and Champions I think does a really good job of emulating that in game mechanics. And so I've started playing a lot more two-handed plays, which I've
Hmm.
enjoyed so much. It takes a lot more of my brain space because there's a lot more going on at the table, but I
Hmm.
I really have been enjoying the two-handed plays.
First of all, is it really true solo if you're bringing hundreds of friends from the internet? I don't know. There's no way we could answer that. Lazy Titan, what do you think about player counts?
I think I would agree. I've by far my most played player count is 2, and I think that's what I enjoy the most. 3 can be fun. I think 4 can drag a little bit much, but I really only mostly play 4 at the con, where it's kind of like an experience. It's sort of
Hmm.
it's part of the whole thing. So I
Yeah.
don't like hate it, and I've never played a game of solo in my life, so I don't know.
You're not a solo player. I'm with you, Lazy Titan. Overwhelmingly, two players, my most played player count. And I think it is the best. I log all my. I have an app because, like you, Nelson, I came from other board games and I log all those plays as well. And I log Marvel Champions. So I don't know. I've got 600 or something logged. And it's overwhelmingly two player. Three player is probably my second most. I think four player for me, I don't really want to play four player that much anymore. I do. I agree with you, Lazy Dad, and I think it drags. You just get more hit points from the villain. It just takes long time. There's a lot of downtime between turns, and it can drag for me. I think two is the best, but three is you do get to dig into those player counts more, like you said, Nelson, which I think is really cool, and you can really specialize a little bit more in like having a deck, which I like the protection build where you're defending for other people or passing out med teams, supporting them with, get behind me and, canceling treacheries with Black Widow, stuff like that. I think is fun to like kind of control the table and then let everybody else go crazy. Solo, I like. And I think is what you said is interesting about the two-handed versus true solo. I think true solo is just more enjoyable as an experience because I'm just focusing on one and we're just playing and it plays a lot quicker, but the game is better. I'm trying to say how to make this make any
It's a more
sense.
rewarding experience at two.
Yeah, but the actual doing it is less fun
Yes.
because I
Yeah.
feel like I'm just stressed out and I'm managing all these things. So
Yeah.
it's less fun, but the game is better. So that's a balance. So I go back and forth between true solo and two handed. But
True solo is swingy, but I mean, you can knock out games in 20 minutes, and
mhm,
it's that gives just a lot of reps for learning how a hero works, and then you can take that to a multiplayer table, and I think just get a lot more, beneficial knowledge out of just multiple quick reps from a hero.
yeah. Do you log your plays, Nelson?
I'm yes, I try to. I usually forget, but
Okay.
there was I don't think I logged 80% of my plays last year, but I've tried to be better about it this year. I log all of my board game plays, but my LCG plays, most of them are on stream, and by the time I'm
Mm,
done with the stream, I go and I forget about it.
yeah. Okay. So we should say, I guess we didn't introduce you properly. If you are living under a rock at this point and you follow Marvel Champions and you don't know who Nelson is, why don't you tell us what you do and where we can find you, Nelson?
Sure, yeah. So I have a channel called Nelson All Over Cards, and on that channel, I do live streams and talk about mainly LCGs and mainly the ones from Fantasy Flight Games, which is Lord of the Rings, Arkham Horror, and of course Marvel Champions. But I also dabble in some of the other stuff with like Ashes Reborn, and there's a couple other LCGs on the horizon that I'm really excited about. But then on the Twitch channel, I do some board game live streams as well. I actually have a board game channel that doesn't give it as much love as the cards channel because the cards is kind of where my heart is at. So
Yeah.
that's what I do.
What is it like to play on stream? Like, there's a lot to manage in the game that you're tracking, right? Threat and damage and health hit points and the villain and yourself. And especially if you're two handed, it's even more to track. How do you track all of that along with, I've watched you, you're engaging with questions the people are asking as you're going, you're paying attention to that, you're paying attention to everything else. How do you manage all that? What's that like?
It's not easy. There's a lot going on, like you said, and trying to make sure that you're catching all the rules. And these games have gotten very, very complex. There's a lot of unique interactions that you have to be aware of, and when you're triggering interrupts versus those forced responses, and making sure that you're hitting all your triggering conditions. A lot of the times, the viewers are really good at helping me if I miss something to help me with that, so that helps. But I've just kind of accepted the fact that I'm not going to play perfect games every single time, and that's okay. I think my role as a live streamer is to provide entertainment
Mm,
and not necessarily to just focus on the game. And so I am trying to engage with the audience, answer those questions and all of that. Now on the recorded plays, I try and be a little bit more, on top of all those rules because there's not an audience to talk with and engage with. But there's a lot going on, and it's not super easy all the time.
yeah, I can imagine. Do you prefer recorded or live?
Live. I
Okay.
prefer live. I do very, very few recorded plays, mostly just two-handed. I don't think I have the confidence yet to do a live two-handed play just because there's already so much going on in both
Yeah.
of those, and it's just not something that I've been super interested in trying. And so one of the byproducts of doing this is I narrate a lot of my actions, I narrate a lot of my
Mm.
turns, and I found myself doing this in all my other board games as well. So I'm like talking through and like, people are like, "What are you doing? Stop!" Like,
You're over there playing Food Chain Magnate and you're telling people what you're going to do. It's your
yeah.
turn. Yeah. um, all right. So we'll move on to our next segment, which is where we usually talk about what we've been playing recently. So, Nelson, I'll let you go first because you're the guest. Why don't you tell us what you've been playing recently?
I got an answer that I think is going to make you really happy. I've
Ooh.
broken Vision back out and put him on
Yes.
the table,
Yes.
and I'm going through the lazy titan over here, just like, what are you doing?
Can't get away from it.
Vision was a hero. He was actually the first hero that I opened on stream. So I bought the
Mm,
pack and I actually opened him, and that was, a long time ago. That was a good time ago. But Vision is one of those heroes that has a fairly decent skill ramp in order to play well, I think. Being able to flip and change his forms, which changes what he does. He can't attack or defend when he's an intangible, but he also takes less damage. And so it just opens up some really interesting deck builds, some minion farming. I love him in the aggression aspect where you have cards like Bring It and you
Mm-hmm.
can just sit there with yeah, Lazy Titan.
Come to the dark
Yep.
side.
Come to the dark side. But you sit there and you just farm those minions and you sit in intangible for forever. And one of the cards that I think really helped his kit was Marked, which is the tactic upgrade, where you attach it to a minion and then attacks against that minion get overkill. Then you run him in Dive Bomb and Hone Technique and follow through. And because you have time, you can just sit there. If you're not sitting with minions that have more than 2 attack, you never take damage from them. You can't really go down to Alter Ego because then they scheme out. But you just sit there, you farm them, and then you flip up and you just throw so much damage with your Dive Bombs and Bring It's. And you're drawing, I think I drew 11 cards in this last game with a Bring
Dang.
It.
What
And it's just
scenario?
Ultron. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it's just a good time. It's fun. Vision's one of those that I think I had fairly low on my I did like a how much I like heroes ranking. And I think that was more because when I had previously been playing him, I didn't have as good of an understanding with the game. And so I wasn't able to navigate all his tips and tricks and stuff that I have been recently. And he's a fun hero.
Yeah, I mean, longtime listeners will know I'm a Vision fanatic. I think he's great, but I'm also realistic about Vision's power level. I think he falls kind of in the middle, maybe towards the top of the middle. He's solid. I think, like you said, there's some interactions you have to be careful with Vision, but I think he's super fun. And glad to hear that you're playing Vision.
I told you I studied.
Yes, see, I love that. I actually think Pinned Down is a great one for Vision.
Pin Down is a really cool one.
Yeah.
I have an idea. I wonder if you've ever done this with how many two player games you played. Have you ever done a Vision Nova combo? You have Vision collect all the minions and you set them up for Nova to just go unleash and kill all of them.
And do Nova stuff.
Let Nova do Nova stuff. But I was thinking about that. I was like, ooh, I think that would be a fun two-handed game to run together.
That's pretty cool. One of my favorite Vision builds recently, I think I talked about in our previous episode, is a different minion build where I use him to collect and control minions with things like Iceman and Karma to take control of powerful minions, Pin Down to hit the ones, and just trying to control minions in that way, which is really fun. But yeah, Vision, great. You know the keys to my heart. You can come back on this podcast anytime. So, Lazy Titan, why don't you tell us what you've been playing recently?
I've strayed from the path. Okay. I have left the path of righteousness and I picked up yellow cards.
Oh.
And I will caveat this to all my diehard fans out there because I know there are many of you.
Yeah.
I did play with the new Psylocke pack comes a card called Float Like a Butterfly, which lets you do 1 additional damage per attack if the enemy that you're attacking is confused. And so I wanted to play that, but I didn't really want to play Psylocke because I was thinking, I don't know, I just wasn't really feeling it. So I played Miles. Miles has a lot of stun and confuse in his deck, so I built sort of a confuse lock combo sort of thing where I would confuse the villain, stun the villain, and then play Arachnobatics with that damage increase for a 1 for 11, which is pretty solid. And then the rest of it was just Justice, draw cards, good stuff. And while I don't love it, it was really good. It was, the amount of thwart you can do and the amount of cards you can draw as both Miles and Justice, one way or another is a great card. It's so much value. And also another all-star of that deck was Build Support, the new player side scheme from Cable, I believe. That card's insane. It's crazy. I was playing Quinn Carrier in my Miles deck because you can just find that and you don't have to be an Avenger. I played it through the Spiders campaign, the Sinister Motives. So with those like special point upgrades you get 2 mulligans as one of them. And so because of that, I was able to consistently get both Avengers Mansion, Quinn Carrier, Champions Mole Bunker, and maybe something else out on turn 1 almost every game because of how many cards you can draw, and Miles can cycle through so many cards to see every turn. Because with Genki and Champions Mole Bunker, he can draw 3 extra cards a turn to pitch them. You just get to sculpt your perfect hand every time, and it's really powerful. and it was able to do some damage and some thwarting. It wasn't maybe the perfect build of it, but I liked the card. Felt Like a Butterfly was one of the reasons I was most excited about Psylocke. I saw that card and I was instantly intrigued because it lets me do more damage.
Yeah, it's a
And
cool
then
card.
I was hoping to build it, and I think it was a good first draft. And I think it's a card worth playing. And for those of you out there who want to play it, I would recommend playing multiple copies for your friends because it does also help them.
Yeah.
It's the most aggression justice card I think we have. So
Which
I can see why you like it. Yeah.
That's my style. When I play Protection, I play Drax. When I play Justice, I play Float Like a Butterfly. I don't like anything else.
Just damage all the time.
All the time.
Yeah. No, that was a fun. I actually played that campaign with you, and because we were playing Standard 2 and Expert, everyone had Steady, so it makes it a little bit easier for them to stay confused because you can hit them with a Confuse and it doesn't drop off right away. They stay confused. It was really good. It was a fun deck, and you played Sting Like a Butterfly on me, or whatever it's called.
Float Like a Butterfly.
Whatever
the
it's
bees
called.
are stinging.
Whatever. I have been playing Captain America recently. I played Cap in a couple different aspects. I did a shield build with him. I did a leadership build with him. I think I also did a protection build with him. Cap was one of my longtime favorites from early on. I got into the game with the Cap hero pack, so right away after the core. And he's really strong. He's just really good. And he's really consistent. And he feels like one of the early heroes. He feels pretty straightforward, right? He's got 2 resource generators. He's got his fancy upgrade. He's got, his X number of thwart cards, X number of defense cards. So his kit feels like an early wave hero. But he's just really good. I mean, his Living Legend ability is awesome. His defense is still good, and the built-in Retaliate, or essentially built-in Retaliate, is really fun. And his ability to ready every time is good. He's really good. I played him through Rise of Red Skull, and he performed well. He's just one of the classics, and probably in my top 10 favorites to play. And I can always go back to him, and it just feels good. And he's a good hero for those times I don't want a ton of really complicated interactions. I've had enough playing, Rogue or Gambit or Shadowcat, some of these ones that really make you focus and, time things out. Cap can kind of play things in whatever order. Just pitch a card, ready yourself, do some damage or thwart. He's really good. So, yeah, Cap is just like, it's just comfort food. Sometimes you just need some comfort food, and that's my Captain America.
I haven't played a lot of Cap, but when I see him played, one of his cards that is always an all-star is Fearless Determination, which is his 0 cost, get +1 thwart for the phase, and then draw a card.
It's just good.
It's just an excellent card because it allows Cap to basically just have 2 lower of a deck size than everyone else. So if you have a 40 card deck, it's really 38 because I believe he has 2 copies because you just always play it. There's no reason not to play it ever. So it's always an all-star.
What's your favorite Cap card, Nelson?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, the heroic strikes are just so solid. The 3 for 6 and stun. That just, I mean, if you're printing an efficient card, that's what you put in the formula right there. I feel like that's really cool. I also really like Agent 13, which
I agree.
is his signature ally that comes in, removes a couple of threat from the scheme, which allows Cap to kind of do his defend. What I really like about Cap is being able to defend and then pitch that card to ready. And so you have still that basic activation. And so just really flexible in that solo play. But Agent 13 really helps out with that. The worst part about Agent 13 though is you don't get to play the other Agent 13, I don't think. They're named different, are they?
No, they're the same.
They're the same? Yeah. Nah, never mind. Yeah, that's the worst part about Agent 13.
I think his signature ally got kind of a bad rap early on. I remember people saying she wasn't very good. I think she's exactly what Cap needs, and she would probably be better today if he came out. But I think some of his cards would just be different, right? If he was designed today, he would have a lot more interactions and be a lot more probably stronger. But he's still really good. Shield block is just always a favorite of mine. I think that's just his go-to card. I mean, you just don't take any damage. Like, okay, move it along. That's just so good.
Cool.
0 costs. I just don't worry about it. Yeah, I love that card. All right, so speaking of cards, why don't we pivot to our card of the day, which is brought to us by Nelson. And Nelson wanted to talk about Sky Destroyer. Nelson, since it was your card, you want to talk about it. Would you mind reading the card for us?
Sure thing. So Sky Destroyer is a basic card. It costs 3, and it's a support. It's a shield vehicle, and it says as a response, after you play a shield card, you can exhaust Sky Destroyer and deal 2 damage to an enemy. It has a printed lightning resource on it, and the flavor text is, quote, "It's not often we deploy a Sky Destroyer, but when we do, that's how you know the situation is about to get serious." From Nick Fury.
Mm. Yeah, we're going to talk all about Sky Destroyer. It came in the Sinister Motives box, and the first thing we always talk about is the art. And so we will give an artist credit. It's Scott Drummond. This is not from comics, this is custom art. And so let's talk about the art. Lazy Titan, why don't you go first? What do you think about the art on this one?
I think it's pretty solid. It's just a ship flying through the clouds, which is cool. It's nothing special. It's not blowing my mind, but I don't hate it. I think it's good stuff. It's not like some art is I like really don't like, and it kind of pulls me out of the game. Um, and there's some art that I will play cards specifically because it has the art on it, and I think this is neither. This is just a card that I think is cool.
Okay. Nelson?
There were two things that kind of jumped out to me. The first one was the color scheme. It's kind of like this warm color tone, which
Mm.
had a nice contrast with the gray basic. But the at first I was a little irked that I feel like the clouds and the Sky Destroyer don't have enough contrast. Like I wish there was a little bit more contrast to make the Sky Destroyer pop. But then I was like, wait, that actually may be a design intention because
Mm.
it's kind of up there. It's not something that is going to be easily seen, and so it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of an interesting design choice, or I guess artistic choice. But I think the other thing that popped out to me was all, I assume they're Quinjets, all how small they are flying around in the background, and it's
Yeah,
like, oh, that's a cool little
I was
touch
gonna say the
to see
same
all
thing.
the, yeah, to see those.
Well, as you both know, they can't be all Quinjets because those are unique. There could only be one Quinjet in the sky.
Those are Quinn carriers.
Those are
Quinn
Quinn
jets, I don't believe, are
carriers.
unique.
Oh, okay. That's true. That's true. Quinjets, maybe they're not unique. That's just true.
I'm not
I
sure.
stand corrected. I guess I'm in the minority here. I don't like this art. I think it's like a weird shape. So it's very kind of bulbous and round. It's hard to tell what I'm looking at. Like, I think when you look at it, it could be like a spaceship. I don't know. Maybe it's supposed to be like a futuristic Sky Destroyer. I don't read a lot of comics, so I don't know what a Sky Destroyer is supposed to look like. But it just kind of like looks like an amorphous, blobby thing. I don't know. I don't like it. I guess I'm in the minority here. I just think it's kind of the
I
it's
just
whatever.
I just looked up what a Sky Destroyer looks like in the comics, and it is just sort of a bulbous giant ship.
Okay,
It's like
so
it looks like a giant blimp, but with guns and lots of planes.
points for accuracy to the artist. Then Scott
Yeah,
Drummond, you represented it well, but maybe I just don't like what they look like.
yeah.
Sky Destroyer, the art I think is eh.
I think Nick Fury would say that it's not meant to look pretty. It's meant to get the job done.
That's true. It's just meant to be effective and not necessarily pretty. So that's a good point. We can just segue right into the theme of this card then. The theme, does that come through with this card? Does it feel like a shield Sky Destroyer?
I I don't know. I feel like 2 damage isn't a lot. Is my main gripe with this card.
Mm-hmm.
2 damage once a phase, or like really once a turn, is like
Mm-hmm.
not great. If you ready it with there's a shield thing you can do, if Agent 13 or something, you can maybe do 4. Just doesn't feel like it's the situation got serious and we sent in this ship, and then like 4 damage is like 10% of most villains' health pool.
Yeah.
Like I just don't feel like that's quite enough.
Yeah. I kind of agree. I feel like two threats kind of low. I mean, maybe, we'll talk to Nelson, who has a true solo background. Maybe, two is obviously more in a true solo because it's not per player. I just feel like two is kind of, I don't know. The flavor text is like when it's serious, you call it Sky Destroyer. So I thought, like, okay, maybe it's going to pull in another shield card or it's going to airdrop a shield ally or something. But it's just 2 damage. I don't know. Nelson?
I like the card. Shield as an archetype is a slow way to play the game, and typically in a true solo sense, the villain's going to outpace you in true solo if depending on how you're playing. Shield is slow. That being said, you're going to get your value out of this card, right? For 4 effective cost over the course, I'm looking for 10 damage. So if I can get this with 5 cards played, that's going to be 10 damage. And the
Mm-hmm.
biggest benefit here is that it helps you clear minions, which is something that I'm usually running my shield deck in Justice, which is something
Mm-hmm.
that Justice can struggle with. And so it provides kind of that plink damage to help take out some of those annoying minions, which I think is really where the benefit comes in. I'm very rarely throwing this damage at the villain. The
Hmm.
villain, I in True Solo, I'm looking for my big cards. I'm looking for arachnobatics. I'm looking for swinging web kicks to do that big chunky villain damage. And this is more to look at that flexible minion damage. A couple of things that I like about it is that you can trigger it as a response to itself. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you play it, you can deal the 2 damage. And then, like Lazy Titan was saying, Agent 13, you can ready a shield support so you can get the multiple benefits. But then it really makes those Homeland Intervention and Global Logistics, which are those 0 cost
Mm-hmm.
shield cards, just even more effective. And in a shield deck, I'm pretty much always running those. Those are super, super good.
Mm-hmm.
And so now it's a 0 for 2, which is on par for kind of the efficiency that I'm typically looking for. But then you
Mm.
also get the added benefit.
Yeah, I like this card a lot in Hawkeye when I play Hawkeye
Mm,
because Mockingbird is shield and you're guaranteed to just recur her pretty frequently. In a full shield build, yeah, you're going to have a lot of interactions or a lot of opportunities to use it. 3 cost feels a little high for me. A 3 cost support is kind of a lot. And the fact that it exhausts, so it's really only once per turn, I feel like limits it. I don't know. The cost feels high to me. This feels like a 2 cost support in my mind.
mm,
One thing I will say is it does get found by build support, which is now an important consideration. So you
Build
can get
yeah,
it out
support.
turn 1
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I could see it at 2. I'm wondering if they play tested it, and at 2 it gets really, really efficient,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're considering Agent 13 in the mix, because 4 damage every single turn seems pretty good, especially in solo. 3 cost, yeah, I could see it being a little bit high. If I'm running shield, a lot of the times I'm also running power in all of us from the wasp pack, so it doubles the cost. And so I'm also wondering if that had some sort of implication of pushing that cost to a 3 rather than a 2. But
Mm-hmm.
helicarriers trigger this, and then Nick Fury triggers this, and so those are 2 gray staples that I'm running. If I include the Sky Destroyer and I start including some of these other basic cards, then it's pretty easy to get to a justifiable level of running
Mm.
power in all of us, which makes it just even easier to get onto the table.
Yeah. Government liaison feeds into that
Government,
whole
yeah,
thing too, right? Yeah. And
yeah,
Agent 13 herself, right? You just get
hmm,
the loop. There's a lot of gray stuff. I do wish there was more shield stuff in other aspects.
yeah.
I feel like it's just limited to justice, which is fine, but I wish it would spread out a little bit more because it's a really cool thing. And I like Field Agent and Government Liaison and those 2 0 cost ones, Homeland Intervention and Global Logistics. You talked about those. Those are really cool cards. But the Justice deck feels kind of like it's always the same Justice deck for the most part. And I'd like a little variety. I don't know.
I would recommend or encourage you to try a blue yellow Spider Woman shield
Oh, yeah, I
Justice
tried
or
that.
shield deck. That's a fun one because you got
Yeah.
your command teams, you got your Triskelion, you've got all of
Maria
the
Hill.
extra little toys. Maria Hill, oh
Yeah.
geez, Maria Hill, yeah. Now Maria Hill, when she enters play, does 2 damage because she was a little weak there for a little bit, but now since
Yeah.
we have Sky Destroyer, it ups her
Now I'll play
efficiency.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maria Hill is an incredible ally. One that I'm surprised hasn't been reprinted, but maybe I get why. But yeah, I played that when the Sinister Motives first came out.
Miles came as Shield.
Yeah, he came as Shield, and I think that's when I played that Spider Woman yellow and blue deck. And it's crazy. It is a slow burn. It takes a little bit to get there, but man, when it gets there, then it's like it's off to the races, and it's really, really powerful and fun.
I think that this card, thinking about it now, the way Nelson explained it as 4 for 10, it feels, I mean, as an aggression player, that feels low. But I think that it does add up, but you really have to have a pretty high density of shield stuff. You have to really be triggering this at least once a turn, probably twice, to really feel really good about it. But generally, when I don't know if we said this on the podcast, but when me and Boom Guy discuss cards, how we wish they would be different, how we wish future cards we made, we always say that there should be limits, and we always err on the side of caution to keep the power creep in check. So whenever we are looking at a card and we think it maybe costs too much at 3 and then maybe it's too good at 2, just go for 3 because it makes it safer. So I think that's what they ended up doing here, and I think I'm okay with that. I think it's good enough for what it does. It gets you the shield kind of slow burn sort of control style deck.
I think if it didn't exhaust, it would be out of control good.
It'd be so awesome, dude. I would play that deck.
It would be
time.
broken, and it would be way too good.
But then you're just playing Magic at this point. So
yeah, so it can't be that. It has to exhaust. But I just think the cost feels a little high. But yeah, it's probably like 2.5 is probably the appropriate cost for this card, realistically, right? And so then you go to 3.
Yeah, especially since it's basic. It can go in any of the decks.
Yeah.
Now, it is kind of locked to Justice with the shield stuff, but if this is an aggression card, it costs 2. Since it's a basic card, add 1 because it's just you're buying flexibility.
Yeah, I agree. If it was a shield card, if it was a justice card, then it could maybe cost less. But when the shield aspect goes beyond justice at some point, which I hope it will, then this is going to fit into more decks, and then that 3 cost maybe feels better. I think our first episode of the podcast was swinging web kick, and that's kind of often where I kind of go back and I think about 3 for 8 damage, right? It's kind of like a benchmark. I don't know if that's the official benchmark, but it feels like kind of. And so 3 for this card, then you want to hit it at least 4 times, 5 times to get the damage equal. I think it's possible. If you get it out early, it feels like an early game card with build support, of course, helps that.
The card's insane.
But mid to late game, it's not worth playing anymore. Late game for sure. Mid game, maybe. I guess you kind of have to feel out where you're at. But
if you're playing Shield, it's a long game, so you could probably get away with it.
Yeah. And it's hard to spend 3 on it, but if you're running a Shield deck, then this is a crucial part of it, right?
Yeah. The other thing that I will say about the Shield archetype and the Shield way to play is that it is really good at thwarting. There's not a ton of damage, and so you are relying on outside of that Shield archetype to do a lot of damage. Now there is the Dum
I hate him.
Ways to get damage and stuff like that, but this also kind of rounds out that if this card did not exist, I think Shield would very much struggle, especially in that true solo setting for damage.
You could be right because they're all mostly yellow cards, and there's not a lot of damage in them. There's really no damage in them, right?
Aside from this, and maybe the minions and your hero cards. Once I can play this card in my beautiful red cards, I'll be loving it.
Yeah, we just need more Shield stuff.
You got Tac Team.
Yeah, no.
Is that a Shield? Is that a Shield card?
Yeah.
Oh boy,
I don't think I've ever played Tag Team. Maybe one like in my first game ever.
It's not super efficient.
No, it's not.
No,
it's like not. Sky Destroyer, but with a limit on it.
That's one of those cards that at some point in the game, I re-sleeved my entire collection. I think it was right around the Rise of the Red Skull. I decided to switch sleeves. I'm glad I did and not wait to do it later. But anyway, so I just re-sleeve things as I use them. So for a while, I would make a deck and be like, oh, I got to swap half these sleeves. And I'm pretty sure Attack Team is still in the original sleeves.
Yeah, it's still sitting there in the same spot it's always been.
Every once in a while, I'll come upon a card and be like, oh, really? I haven't played this in 40 years? Oh, okay, I guess I'll re-sleeve it. But it happens very rarely anymore. But I'm pretty sure Attack Team is one of them, and I don't think it will ever be put into my Dragon Shields. It's just not good. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe they'll come out with a card that will make it better, right?
Till we get a Nick Fury hero who makes Tag Team way better.
Or something like they did with Monica Chang, right?
Yeah.
She made Surveillance Team better. Maybe they'll pull something out with Tac Team and make it better. Who knows? There's a world out there they could do with it.
I'm with you, Lazy Titan. No, I want a Nick Fury deck. I want to see how that shakes out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the Nick Fury hero pack.
All right, then we're quick sidebar here. We're talking about heroes we want to have. What's the number one hero that you want to have, Nelson? Is it Nick Fury?
No, it's gonna be Jessica Jones.
Ooh, that's a deep cut.
Deep cut.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Netflix series. I think it was a Netflix series. The the Jessica Jones, but also just the idea of having someone who's super strong, but also kind of like that private detective. So I think you're going
Mm-hmm.
to see like really heavy thwarting as well as damage. And I'm
Mm,
interested to see which way they lean for
mm.
her in like thematics to pair with those mechanics. Is she going to be, you know, really high, kind of like a She-Hulk type character where high attack but also has hopefully better, more efficient thwarting cards in her kit? But I'm a Jessica Jones fan.
Okay, Jessica Jones, Lazy Titan.
I
What's the one
have
you want?
sort of a two-part answer for this. So one, I have a hero that I really want to see, and
Okay,
two is I really want there to be a Galactus villain pack.
Mm.
That just
okay,
sounds really sick.
that sounds
Um,
plausible,
I
actually.
I know that the Fantastic Four are coming at some point, I'm sure, and he is a villain of theirs. But also, I feel like Doctor Doom has to be there. But I would love a
Mm,
Galactus, specifically a scenario pack, because the way they make a lot of crazy stuff with scenario packs, like Mojo and the Wrecking Crew, and they do always
yeah.
change the rules a lot. So I think that would be really cool. As far as heroes go, I think I would have to say Ghost Rider,
Mm,
specifically Robbie Reyes, which is the newer Ghost Rider,
okay.
not the classic Johnny Blaze. That would be my vote, just because so cool.
I think if I had to pick one, it's Vivian
Oh,
Okay.
true. Yeah,
because
that's
I
not
think
surprising.
Vivian is not likely to be a hero pack. I don't know. Like obviously the one I want, if I can only have one, it'd be Daredevil.
Yeah.
But I know they're gonna make Daredevil, so I don't have to wish for Daredevil. He's gonna come. So then I think it's probably Vivian, who is cool and is a champion. Also boosts androids because as much as I play Vision, the android allies are mostly locked into protection, with the exception of Machine Man and Vivian, which he can't play. So I would like some more stuff to help them, some different allies to play to make them feel better in different aspects. He obviously works in all the aspects, but I think protection is his best aspect, and so some more cards to help would be cool.
That'd be a cool one.
There's a bunch of the champions that I think they could do with Brawn to help out Hulk and She-Hulk, and I think that
Patriot.
could be a whole cool wave. All right, so we've talked about the art and the theme and the power. How fun is Sky Destroyer? How fun is it to play? Does it feel good to play? Do you like playing it? You happy when it hits in your hand? You're going to play it under the table, or does it feel
I
like,
think
yeah,
I think Sky Destroyer is it's an interesting card because obviously I play red, so I don't play a ton of Justice, which is where Shield mostly ends. But I've played the Shield like a couple times. I played with Miles when it first came out, um, and I don't think at the time I knew that Sky Destroyer triggered itself, which is a hilarious interaction that is just so wild. I think Sky Destroyer feels great when you trigger it, and it feels really sad, at least to me, when I play a shield card and it's already exhausted. That's, I think, part of the reason I came into this sort of a little grumpy about Sky Destroyer is because every time I play it once and I'm like, oh, cool. And I play a shield card and do 2 damage. Awesome. And I play another shield card and I'm out of luck. And I'm just wishing I could do it again. I think ultimately it is good.
I don't think it's super fun to play. I think it's good. It's a solid card. I don't think it's super fun. I'm never like excited when I have it in my hand. And like you, Lazy Titan, I'm always a little bummed when it's on the table and I have two shield cards in my hand because I'm just missing out on two damage. Unless you have Agent 13, which is kind of an interaction you can create, but it's hard. It's a lot of combos you got to set up. Got to find her. So super fun. I think it's okay. Nelson.
Yeah, it's not a flashy card. It's not an super exciting card to play. Now, I think the most exciting time to play it is when you trigger it from itself. I think that's just fun to do.
Yeah.
Um, it feels more like a necessity than an exciting card to play for me. Like if I'm running shield, I'm running this card. Like there
Hmm.
really isn't a shield deck that focuses mainly on shield that does not include Sky Destroyer. And so at
Yeah.
that point, like it almost takes away the fun of deck building around because I view it as kind of a tax. That being said, I think that it is a good card. If you're running these heavy shield decks, if you're able to throw these, you know, plink damage everywhere, especially if you're running someone who doesn't necessarily have that in their kit. But yeah, I mean it's a card that I view as a necessity, not necessarily something that is fun to build around. It's just I'm running shield. I'm taking these 15 cards, and they're going to be in every shield deck I ever play.
All right. Well, then I think we need to move into final score time. So, as we tell everybody who's on the pod or listens to the pod, Nelson, when we do final scores, 5 is true neutral. It's right in the middle. So, with that said, I'll let Nelson have the last word on this card because he's the one who brought it with us. Lazy Titan, do you want to start us off and give us your score on Sky Destroyer?
As far as Sky Destroyer goes, it's pretty good. I've come around on it a little bit more just because part of the reason that I didn't like it is how bad it feels to play that second shield card. I think ultimately it is an efficient rate, especially the earlier you get out in the game. If you end up playing a long game with shield, you play 10 turns, it could potentially do 20 damage if you're playing build support because you can get it out turn 1 now. And 3 or really 1 for 20 is pretty solid. You can split that however you want to. You can use it as things come out. I think that's a pretty good rate ultimately. And the theme of it, I think, like we said during the theme part earlier, it doesn't feel like a Sky Destroyer that like comes in and this is the big guns. It sort of feels like just like covering fire, which isn't really what the art gives me. And as far as
Or
the
the
art
flavor
goes,
text.
or the flavor text, as far as the art goes, it's just a bulbous ship, which has some smaller ships. So you can it's a big ship clearly. I think overall I'll give this card a 6.5. It's good, but it's not changing my life. But you probably should run it in a shield deck. You're probably gonna want it.
Yeah, I think, like you, we talked about the art. The art pulls it down a little bit for me. I don't think it's very good or very attractive to look at, especially for a card that sits on the table for a long time. I got to look at it over and over again. I wish it was a little nicer to look at. The theme doesn't exactly hit for me because, again, it doesn't feel like the big guns, like the flavor text makes me feel like it should be. The fun of it we talked about, it just feels like procedural. You put it down, you get the 2 damage, but it's not like a super enjoyable or exciting time. And it's pulled down a little bit for me by the fact that it's almost a necessity in shield builds, right? Which takes away some of the creativity in deck building. I don't feel like I have a lot of agency. I'm going to build a shield deck and do this and this. And it's like, well, I have to include Sky Destroyer because otherwise I'm an idiot. So for me, I'm going to put it right in the middle, 5. I don't love it. I don't hate it. I include it in shield decks and I don't include it in anything else. So right in the middle for me.
Yeah, I think 5 is where I would land looking at it in a vacuum without other cards that interact with it. It's a card. I mean, you play a card, you get 2 damage. It's not flashy, it's not exciting. It does feel necessary, which I think, in my opinion, brings down my rating of the card. If a card feels necessary, I don't like that. I like the flexibility and the variability in deck builds. And so when I'm building a deck, and this is in every single one of the shield decks, that to me feels less fun. And so that would bring it down. That being said, I love the interactions of trying to trigger this multiple times with Agent 13s and command teams and trying to get multiple utilizations. And that to me is a puzzle that I very much enjoy.
Mm.
And so that would bump it up. I think probably about to a like a 6 or a 7. Um, I'm gonna land with 6. If we're on this podcast, if we're gonna tend towards the less efficient or the less good, we'll tend towards the 6. I'm gonna give it a final rating of a 6. But that being said, it's a good card. I like it. It's something that the shield archetype was something that I've played a lot of, so this card has seen a lot of use. And like Lazy Titan was saying, I think it's going to be really fun. I haven't revisited this card since we got build support, and I think it's going to be really fun to come back and see how this interacts now that we can get it onto the table turn 1, especially if there's a cable player sitting down.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad this card exists, and I think
Yep.
it can only get better, right? The more shield cards we get, this will only become a better card. So I'm excited for that. But yeah, I think we kind of ended in the same range on it. Like we don't super disagree. Not a lot of divergence there, but that's Sky Destroyer. So Nelson, before we sign off, where can people find you if they want more of you and they somehow don't know yet?
Yeah, you can find me either on Twitch at Nelson All Over or on YouTube at Nelson All Over Cards.
Okay. I will put links to those down below in the show notes. So if you want to find Nelson, you can click on those. Thanks for coming on. It was great to have you. We hope you'll come back again. It was very exciting. And I'm glad we talked about Sky Destroyer. Anything you
Yeah.
want to say to everybody before we sign off?
No, just thanks for having me on. I have a lot of fun. I really like the format of this podcast where you take one specific card. I just think that's a really cool way to approach the game and, talk about it strategically as well as artistically in the feel of the card. I think that's a really cool way to do it. So I appreciate you having me on. I look forward to the next time.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. We are big fans of Nelson here as well, so I'm glad that you came on. And for everybody here at Winning Hand, thanks for listening. Again, if you like the show, please do leave a rating and a review. It does help us get the show into people's hands or
5-star
phones or headphones or whatever. And as Lazy Titan always says, only 5-star. If it's not 5-star, just don't leave it.
4.5 is maybe acceptable.
Leave whatever.
Anything
you
lower
like.
than that, just round up.
That's inefficient. All right. Well, thanks for everybody for listening, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
See ya.